Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. If my husband were here, he would say that I probably don't need the mic. Just saying. I have several little stories to tell. This is really not my story, it's my family's story. As you know, as Brian just said, I am a children's author and a writer, and Flanker Press published my book, Gander Goes to Come From Away, in 2019. And because of that, I was asked to be a speaker at the Beyond Words tours. And I did that the summer of 2019 several times, and it's because of that experience that they asked if I would come and share the same story that I told then tonight. So I'm going to try to do my best to tell the story the same way that I did a few times for small groups of people on the Beyond Words tour. 2001, my husband was still trying to convince me that golf was fun. It really isn't, but I was letting him try to convince me. So that morning, my husband is an air traffic controller. He's retired now and works as an air traffic controller consultant. But that day, he was expected to go to work later in the afternoon. So that morning, we dropped our daughter Samantha off at school, and we went down on the Gander golf course. And it was blissful, other than the golfing. It was sunny, it was warm, it was lovely. We spent the morning together. No cell phones, of course, no way of anyone getting in contact with us. And then we went into the golf club at the end of our golfing, and that's when we began to realize something was horribly wrong. Everyone was sitting around a television screen that they had, and my husband, being an air traffic controller, he was talking to another air traffic controller, and they were saying, "Oh my goodness, how could something go so wrong that a plane would hit, one of the towers?" And while they were discussing this, unfortunately, we were watching live when the second one hit. And then we knew something was very, very wrong. So we left immediately. My husband checked in with work, and I went home. When I got home, I started to watch it on television, and I was simply horrified, heartbroken, dismayed, every possible word that you could think of. All that day, I was in sort of a trance, staring at the television, thinking, how is this happening? Why is this happening? It was horrible. So when I started to hear that there were planes landing in Gander, and the first thing that I heard was there may be as many as 10,000 passengers. We were told that because somebody counted the aircraft, and they worked out the maximum capacity of each aircraft, and they said it could be up to 10,000 people. So thank goodness I had a purpose. I started to clean. I cleaned the house, I did all the laundry, I put all the bedclothes out on the line, and I thought, okay, people could be coming here to our house, so I have to get ready. The next day, people started to arrive at the shelters. And for some reason, and I think it may have something to do with my age at that time, and being what we used to delicately call that time of the month. But one of the very first things I did was I found myself in Shoppers Drug Mart, which was in the Gander Mall at the time, and I thought to myself, I can manage $100. I'll spend $100 before taxes. And I went down the aisle and I picked up a variety of whatever I could think, feminine protection that someone might need. I took the 2 bags, and my daughter was a student of Gander Academy. I was used to the teachers there, so that's the first place I went. I walked into Gander Academy, and a friend of mine, Joanne, who was teacher librarian there, she met me and she said, "What have you got?" And I said, "Well, I wouldn't want anyone to be caught," because I was thinking if they're on the plane and they're only expecting a 4 or 5 hour or 10-hour flight even, and they're on the plane all night and now it's the next day, someone might need some of this. And she shook her head and she said, "Only you, Dawn, only you would think of that." That wasn't true, of course. Lots of people thought of that. Lots of people thought of other things too. But while I was there, I noticed that there were families with small children. And so I went home, and my daughter, who was 9, I sat her down and I said, "Samantha, you know, there's some little kids there, and they could use some things. What would you be willing to let me have? And so she went through her toys, and she went through her books. And most importantly, this was the sleepover days, and Samantha had 3 sets of comforters that you could zip up into a sleeping bag. I don't know if any of you remember those. She had a Barney, she had a Beauty and the Beast, and she had a Snow White. And they came with pillows and pillowcases, and you could have them open or you could zip them up, and I had already washed them because the laundry had, you know, this is how I was coping, was doing laundry mostly. So she said, okay, Mom, but she wasn't really convinced. She was only 9. So I thought, this time when I go back to the school, I'm going to take Samantha with me. So Samantha and I, we went back to Gander Academy, and when we walked in, I had a couple of very large bags. Samantha had bags with some of her toys and her books, and we saw this mom coming out. And she had one small child in her arms, and she had one attached to her leg. And those of us here know how children, when they're very afraid and they're nervous, they grab your leg and they just won't let go. So the mom was walking with one child attached and the other one in her arms, and she said, "Who is that for?" And I said, "This is for whoever needs it." And she said, "May I have it?" And I just went like that. The look on her face, I will never forget. And I am so incredibly grateful that I took Samantha with me that day so she could experience that, have that memory, and let that inform who she becomes as a person. It was very important. When I got back home, my mom called. My mom, Bretta Brown, was working at Gander Collegiate at the time, and her and my brother Keith, who's much younger than I am, were both volunteering. They were either asleep or they were volunteering at Gander Collegiate. And if you watch the You Are Here documentary, you'll see my mom briefly. She steps into the camera, realizes she's on camera, and steps back out. That's my mom. Anyway, my mom was there, and she spotted a young lady. She was crying, she was all alone, and my mom, being who she is, she approached this young lady. By this time, it was one night on the plane and at least one night in the shelter. As I think back, I'm not exactly sure if it was the 2nd or 3rd day, but my mom approached this young lady. She found out her name was Libby. Libby was from Israel. She was 17, and she was all alone. Her family had traveled from Israel to New York the previous day to attend a family celebration in New York. But Libby had to stay one extra day because she was writing an exam for her last day in school, or for her last year rather, in school. So because of that, Libby found herself in Gander and all alone. She was very upset. My mom approached her and she said, "I have a daughter and she's married and they only have one daughter. She's a little girl. Would you like to go there?" And Libby said, "I think so, but I'll have to call my mom and dad." So Mom called me, told me about this. I went to Gander Collegiate. I got Libby. And I said, "You come home, phone your dad, phone your mom." They're in New York, of course. They're at the epicenter where all of this horror was happening. So you call your mom and dad, you talk to them, and if they are okay, we'd love to have you stay. But I said, before we do that, do you like fried chicken? And she said yes, and because I knew she must be, and she was 17. So we went and got Mary Brown's, and then I brought her home. Libby called her dad, and her mom, but her dad I remember quite well because he needed to speak with me, and he needed to speak with my husband, Dean, and he had a very long conversation with us, and then finally he said, "Yeah, I think I'm okay. Libby can stay with you." So Libby stayed with us. She ate her fried chicken. She had a really long shower. She was 17, of course. And then she went to bed. And Libby stayed in bed because, believe me, I wasn't sleeping. She did not come out of that room. She did not wake up that first night for 12 hours. And I have to say that probably the biggest compliment that I've ever received in my life is that Libby felt safe enough to come to our home and to get in the spare bed that was in our home, close the door, and go to sleep. God bless Libby. Thank you. Thank you very much.